Hands down, the funniest thing about Yuji and Sukuna's relationship was Sukuna realizing he had a son. Dude's reaction was,
Ugh. Brother, ugh. What's that? What's that, brother?
But to be fair, he was probably more grossed out by the prospect of having a baby with his mans. In the world of Jujutsu Kaisen, twins are recognized as one soul by cursed energy and the laws that govern it, i.e. fate. Before you fix your thumbs to cook me in the comments, no, I am not suggesting Maki's kids are also biologically Mai's kids. Wasuke and Sukuna were a special case of conjoined twins. Unlike Maki and Mai, who only shared the same soul, Wasuke and Sukuna also share the same body. One set each of Ryoma and Sukuna's extra features originally belonged to Wasuke. When he consumed his twin brother, regardless of whatever motivations it had for what came after, it was a must that Sukuna jacks the remains of Wasuke's part of the body, in order to keep the tissue from dying and prevent a premature death from sepsis. Streets didn't call him double-barrel Sukuna though, so it's safe to assume he originally shared his reproductive system with Wasuke also. The soul is the body, and the body is the soul. A cursed spirit's life cycle starts with a cursed womb. A human's life cycle begins with the soul. The body is then formed according to the specifications of the soul. Two-Faced Sukuna's body was formed according to the specifications of both Wasuke and Sukuna's souls. However else we may say Wasuke is different from Sukuna, their souls printed the exact same lower half. Bro, no way I just yapped unironically about Sukuna's equipment, sweet mother of Jesus. Hey look mate, these brothers don't just share the same soul like Maki and Mai. Sukuna and Wasuke shoot the same bullets from the same barrel. Jin is the fruit of Sukuna's loins, bro. I may as well just come out and say it. Absolutely hilarious, by the way. After the Culling Game, the whole time Sukuna thought Yuji is his son. He already had reasons in his mind to hate Yuji, but he was especially disgusted to see the fruits of his loins tied down by identity, morality, and the such, because like Sukuna, Yuji's capabilities are far too great. It pissed him off endlessly, the waste of prime seed. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. I want to talk about Wasuke. I made a video detailing Yuji's heavenly restriction. It's not up on this channel, but I'll drop an HD remake soon, courtesy of a binding vow I made with my guys Zukora Joe and Zlatan. In that video, I went over why Sukuna made the wrong assumption that his finger being implanted in Yuji is what ensured Yuji's strength as a vessel. I also pointed out Sukuna's inadequate understanding of the soul. Sukuna was wrong about so many things when it came to Yuji, it'll be quicker to list all the times he was right. I mean, this guy passed away believing Yuji was his son. Another thing I believe he was mistaken about was Kenjaku being the luckiest character in all of fiction, because that's what Kenjaku would have to be just to happen upon Wasuke's reincarnated soul. After the birth of Sugurigeto, the timely reincarnation of Mahito, finally coming into possession of the prison realm, the forced evolution of Tengen, Toji freaking Zayn. Do you have any idea how mind-bogglingly lucky you'd have to be if you were Kenjaku and you just happened upon Wasuke's reincarnated soul? In Sendai, Japan of all places, by the way. Not to mention at a time where you were just contemplating how your own DNA is a limiting reagent in the equation you've been trying to polish your whole life. I do not care how many jackpots and black flashes Akari pops back to back. All these things conveniently coming together by chance would make Kenjaku the luckiest guy around to the point of terrible writing, which I just don't think is the case. Clearly, Kenjaku was manipulating Sukuna just like he did everybody else. And Sukuna can tell the forest from the trees when it came to Kenjaku just like everybody else. Again, Sukuna spent 2 months with Kenjaku thinking they are co-parents. We know that is incorrect because Gege later clarified in a volume extra that Wasuke is Sukuna's twin, and not Jin like Sukuna believed. Be that as it may, Gege did not revise this part of Sukuna's dialogue, as Shueisha could so easily do if a mistake was printed. So this was an intentional story beat and Sukuna genuinely had no idea what the fuck was going on. And for good reasons. It was inevitable that Sukuna would find out his connection to Yuji, but it was critical that Sukuna knows as little information about Wasuke as possible. If Sukuna put together how Wasuke really came about in addition to the things that already didn't make sense about Yuji, he may have figured out Kenjaku's deception to deadly effect. For Kenjaku, I bring this to you to say that Sukuna is not a reliable narrator on the subject of Yuji. Almost everything he told Udaume here is incorrect. Yuji being born with one of his fingers sealed inside him was the only factually accurate explanation he offered. But even then, his reasons for why Kenjaku did it were way off as well. Half his perception was clouded by his emotions and the other half by Kenjaku's deception. He was only another hamster in Kenjaku's wheel and Gege could not have portrayed this any better. He hoped we'd figure this out on our own as that's our job if we're engaged, but since we didn't, he went out of his way to clear this up in a volume extra. In life, a man has to do two things by himself. He has to do his own dying and he's gotta do his own believing. Don't get caught up in Kenjaku's deceit like a sucker in a trap that was only designed for Sukuna. Hit subs, stick around, and over the course of Season 3's run will clear the many misconceptions surrounding Kenjaku's plan. Starting with Wasuke's birth not being natural as his existence closely mirrors Takeru. Sukuna, in his understandably limited knowledge in the field, thought that the body and the soul were separate. To nearly fatal results, by the way. So he could not even imagine that Kenjaku could replicate Wasuke's soul information from their Dyomin Sukuna body and input that information into a quote-unquote cursed corpse. But in Wasuke's case, a highly compatible zygote. When Kenjaku used the remote idol transfiguration in Shibuya, he knew how to alter the souls and bodily function of 1,000 people on his first go. This is a man who knew exactly what he was doing. In my opinion, that remote idol transfiguration was the most advanced curse technique application we've seen in the whole JJK. Just the combination of advanced curse technique application and secret molecular biology knowledge to pull this off to surgical precision. You can tell this is a man who knew exactly what he was doing. We have a mount of evidence he had experienced fiddling with the soul already from Yuji and his brothers, whom are the only ones we know of, by the way. Who knows how many people had to die for Kenjaku to gain this forbidden scientific knowledge. And it's implied to be by the scores from the activities and body count of Noritoshi Kamo alone. Kenjaku had a more profound understanding of the soul than even Mahito, and this was revealed at a time where he couldn't say too much or risk exposing Geto's curse technique to the disaster curses. Point is, how and why Kenjaku would know is overdetermined. Takeru was an artificial soul containing Kusakabe's nephew's exact soul information, but bound to a cursed corpse through Masamichi's curse technique. Wasuke is an artificial human created from his soul information contained in Sukuna's mummy. Masamichi may have created the first true artificial soul that mirrors humans, but Kenjaku created a cursed corpse-like artificial human before Masamichi was even born. Kenjaku had primary possession of Sukuna's mummy and his fingers as he sought to Sukuna's Soku Shinbutsu. What is not in question is Kenjaku's capabilities, because Yuji and Choso are way more complex creations in Kenjaku's catalog in my opinion. I believe the primary reason Kenjaku offered to turn Sukuna into a cursed object was so he could have unrestricted and unadulterated access to Sukuna's body as a research subject. I cannot stress enough how every nook and cranny of Sukuna was designed to author your obituary. Unlike Yuki, who was laid back in her approach to recruiting her dream subject Toji, as if he'd just take time from losing money on Summer League NBA to cure the world of curses from the goodness of his heart. Kenjaku pulled out the old carrot and stick for Sukuna. Let me turn you into a cursed object like me and you'll participate in my culling game in exchange. You've never been satisfied in this life, so traverse the ages with me and in a few hundred years I'll present you a meal you can slurp up so good you could die. I don't think Kenjaku had a concrete idea of what he'd get out of Sukuna, but the opportunity was just too good to pass up. I say this because he had to try and fail in order to arrive at the idea of Yuji. We know he has held trials dating back since the Meiji era from the death paintings, but I doubt Chozo was the first time Kenjaku tried to create something worthy of killing the king. And it wasn't until he discovered Toji and his outrageous soul that Kenjaku finally figured out how to create his masterpiece. Nonetheless, eventually he had a more concrete idea on what to do with the Sukuna samples, but they were not enough. He also needed Sukuna's seed to play his consort when he came to accept that he couldn't create something beyond his potential with his genetics alone. I think all of us can agree if Kenjaku flat out asked to give Sukuna a Jujutsu colonoscopy alongside a little jar to blast off into, his face would be in pieces by the time he finishes that sentence. Kenjaku eventually ran into a wall when he used himself as the primary seed. But if the ceiling is trying to surpass with this creation is Sukuna, then who better than Ryomen Sukuna himself to provide the floor? Wasuke is not the reincarnation of Sukuna's brother. He's closer to a clone by conventional standards. But I guess Curse Energy wouldn't care to tell the difference. Nonetheless, Wasuke was incarnated in an era where his twin brother Sukuna was legally dead by Jujutsu law. So he wasn't half-assed like Maki and Mai. Wasuke Itadori had just as much curse energy as Heian era Sukuna naturally possessed. Wasuke was like Yuta if Deka didn't get hit by a car, and he went about his life not knowing about curses beyond occasionally seeing them. Though he had a different face, Wasuke's body carried the same DNA even down to some genetically identical body part. Dear God, here go yapping about his equipment again. I believe the reason Gege didn't put much focus into Jin's character is because it wouldn't hit like people think it would, and it was entirely unnecessary for the plot to move. Wasuke, on the other hand, was not the reincarnation of Sukuna's brother, but something that had his brother's information in it. Ryomen Sukuna would never consent, so Kenjaku created an identical copy of his body that would consent. That's pretty much what Gege wanted us to take from Wasuke and Panda's plotline. Takeru, Masamichi, and Panda were meant to expand our understanding of the soul, and establish that a soul can be perfectly replicated and reproduced with the right materials. Now that we've established Sukuna was talking out of his ass, tell me which is more likely. Option number 1, Kenjaku created a perfect clone of Sukuna's brother. Or option number 2, Kenjaku conveniently ran into Wasuke's reincarnated soul. Bro, the more I say it as I record this, the dumber it sounds. How would Kenjaku even identify Wasuke in a new life? They never even met on the first one. Wasuke was never born. Anyway, man, I won't even insult your intelligence by finishing that question. It may have been the CTE talking, cause Yuji rocked this shit a few weeks before this, I'm not gonna hold you. I mean, Sukuna was at that advanced age where the chin cannot take as much punishment, so I'm gonna assume Unk had a concussion when he said this. Basically, Kenjaku just needed to get Sukuna's seed another way because Sukuna wouldn't in a million years let him hit. And that's the truth. Jujutsu Kaisen gets hilarious when you look at things exclusively from Sukuna's perspective. In his mind, he was in a messed up timeline where one conjoined twin would say no. So Kenjaku came back later whilst he was asleep and shot his shot at his brother. And by the time Sukuna woke up to some strange sensations, it was already over. He had already lost. This was truly our Jujutsu Kaisen. It was inevitable that Sukuna finds out Yuji carries his blood. It could be justified. Kenjaku could easily lie his way out of that one. But it would be fatal if Sukuna found out Wasuke was also Kenjaku's doing. That would compromise the rationalization Sukuna made up in his mind for the birth of Yuji Itadori. Just like he did Megumi, in chapter 1, Sukuna chose Yuji as his vessel. It was not a coincidence Yuji was the one to find Sukuna's finger. It lured him there when Sukuna sensed a soul that could suppress him. What he didn't know is that Kenjaku placed his finger there in the first place, essentially orchestrating chapter 1's events. Kenjaku laundered his actions through Jujutsu headquarters as he was running the Kamo clan from the shadows the entire time. It was important Sukuna thinks he just made a bad bet landing him in the cage that was Yuji Itadori. That and Kenjaku locking him up in a cage by design are two different things. That would elicit two completely different responses from Sukuna once he found out Yuji was also Kenjaku's doing. Once he found out though, Sukuna's ego did all the coping on Kenjaku's behalf. Sukuna deadass believed because his Himothy James, Kenjaku needed to create a designer vessel just for him. Personally, I think Sukuna should have known something was up when he sensed Yuta could also suppress him. That makes 2 potential vessels he came across in like a month. Anyway, Kenny eliminated Gen so Yuji would leak out as little information about Kenjaku's moves as possible through his memories to Sukuna. Little did he know, Sukuna would be so salty that he would voluntarily stay away from Yuji's happy memories purely out of spite. Exploring Jin and Wasuke any further is crackpot territory and empty calories. The people around Wasuke and Yuji lived or died according to Kenjaku's whims. That's all we need to know from this part of the plotline. It is unfortunate, but Wasuke only lived a full life because Kenjaku wanted him to raise Yuji. Now, I find it absolutely hilarious Sukuna described Yuji as Kenjaku's kid, then went on to say a piece of himself fathered Yuji in the next breath. Bro articulated as much as he could about the situation whilst highlighting the limited extent of his involvement. What's also hilarious is Uraume picking up on this and not drawing any further attention to this news, even when concluding Yuji directly inherited his potential from Sukuna. You just know they are curious and potentially feel messed up about disrespecting young Master Yuji earlier. During their squabble with Hakari, Uraume was very specific that the B-side should be ashamed they hadn't presented an equal to their lord since Satoru Gojo. In hindsight, this felt directed at Yuji-sama specifically. Like he should have had the function all the way turned up at this point as they now saw Yuji-sama as a potential equal to Sukuna. Uraume adores Sukuna, and I find it hard to believe Uraume in their glazing ways can just overlook Yuji as a spawn of her sire. I laugh sometimes when I read this panel because Sukuna sounds like a conjoined twin in Hen Eramari show, explaining why only Wasuke is the father because he wasn't legally present when his brother used their wood and their soul to fornicate with Kenjaku. If you are entertained and want to know the truth from the lies as it parses from Kenjaku's lips, hit subs. Catch me on the next one, gang.